Good morning, you guys. Happy Monday. Today we begin our second story in Unit 2, which is a very long story, so we're going to be breaking this one apart this week and reading it a little bit each day. The title of it is Being in and Seeing Nature. The writing of John Burroughs. That name should sound very familiar to you as we read about John Burroughs last week. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into John Burroughs' life and his love for nature. Today we're paying attention to those key details, and we're going to summarize the main idea of page 12, and then we're going to highlight some of those key details from the page 13. No, we're going to skip 13. 13 we'll do in class together. 14 and 15, and then we'll write our main idea summary in class. That'll be one of your assignments today. So pay attention. Starting in paragraph 1, pioneering nature writer John Burroughs found his artistic voice and also a sense of delight and wonder by carefully observing the world around him. Okay, his artistic voice, the voice he uses to write with, and a sense of delight and wonder by carefully observing the world around him, which we learned last week. He wrote about nature, he watched it from his home out the window. Okay. He grew up on a farm in Delaware County, New York. How many of you guys are going to farm in New York? There are suburbs in New York, so yeah, there could be farm and country land in New York. As a boy, one of his favorite things to do after completing his chores was to escape, to a special place he later called Boyhood Rock. Burroughs liked to look out from this spot on Old Clump Mountain, a part of the Catskills, and think deeply about what he was seeing. Okay, so if we look at these main ideas, we understand that his observation of nature began when he grew up as a boy on the farm. And as soon as he'd finished completing his chores, he would escape to this place called Boyhood Rock and think deeply about nature. So this began for him when he was very young. Paragraph 2. Burroughs' habit of studying and reflecting on nature stayed with him his entire life. So he never outgrew it. He became a teacher and a government worker. Pretty cool. He also gained fame writing essays for magazines. So he wrote some essays for magazines. By the 1880s, Burroughs had become a full-time writer. He wrote of fishing and hiking. He wrote about the seasons. He wrote about the birds, the flowers, and animals that he saw outside his window. So he had a few different jobs up here before he committed to being a full-time writer of all the wonderful things that he saw in nature. Burroughs spent most of his life near where he grew up. In summers, he preferred the view from the small cabin in the woods, which I think is what we read about last week. He named this place Slabsides, and from it he recorded the daily lives and interactions of his animal neighbors. So, if we look at these 3 paragraphs, we want to say, okay, based on what we learned, what can we say is the main idea? How would we summarize these 3 paragraphs? And we're going to write that summary right here in your notebook on the side, so write it with me. Okay, so from up here we can see, I'm going to just write summary. This is so far, this isn't the whole story, but summary of what we've read so far. In paragraph 1, we learned that Burroughs was interested from the time he was young. Okay, so from when he was a little boy. And Because of this interest as a young child, it led him to becoming a full-time writer as an adult. So again, you see that we had some key details that told us specifically some things he did prior to becoming a full-time writer. But when we're focusing on summarizing, we're just going to hit those highlights. So the fact that he was interested in nature from the time he was young, and this helped him to focus on nature in his writing as an adult. Those are the main key details we pulled from all of those ideas, or the main details that we included in that summary. Okay? All right, we're going to skip the next page because this is a poem called Waiting, and we'll read it together in class, and go to page 14. All right, we're going to read together page 14 and 15, and then today for your assignment, when your independent work, you guys are going to write a summary. Burroughs is often praised for his descriptive writing, and I think I made a mention of that last week, all the descriptions he had. Its style of observation is more literary than scientific, so he doesn't focus necessarily on the science of what he sees, but the literary version. He takes the reader on the same personal journey that he is experiencing, narrating the event. So he narrates what he sees so that you can see it too. His gentle lyrical writing gives a human dimension to non-human subjects. For example, in The Chipmunk, Burroughs observes the main character emerging from his winter nest. Now rested, the chipmunk is ready for a glorious spring. All right, and here is an excerpt from The Chipmunk. So he's going to take us through the journey of the chipmunk coming out of his winter nest. The first chipmunk in March is as sure a token of the spring as the first bluebird for the first robin, and it is quite as welcome. Some genial influence has found him out there in his burrow. So he's in his burrow, deep under the ground, and waked him up and enticed him forth into the light of the day. So he's coming up and out of his burrow in the ground. The red squirrel has been more or less active all winter. Okay, so the red squirrel has been more or less active all winter, unlike that chipmunk, right? His track has dotted the surface of every new fallen snow throughout the season. But the chipmunk retired from view early in December. He has passed the rigorous months in his nest. I like this description of the rigorous months. What is that word that we use when animals go to sleep underground or away somewhere for those winter months, those rigorous months where the weather's rough? Think about, what is that word? I'm going to draw a little arrow and put a question mark. See if you can tell me when we come to class what we call that. He rests beside his hoard of nuts, some feet underground. When he emerges in March and is seen upon his little journey along the fence or perched upon a log or rock near his hole in the woods, it is another sign that spring is at hand. Okay, and he emerges in March. So he's down in his little burrow with his food underground, and he emerges in March. Burroughs' essays often have a poetic quality. You hear the word poem there. In the next two passages from The Chipmunk, Burroughs uses personification when he gives human characteristics to the chipmunk. We talked about personification Friday when we talked about the wind humming and singing and the tall grasses waving. He also compares the animal's actions to those of human beings. So that is personification, when something that's not a person is compared to a person. The chipmunk becomes much like a character in the story. The chipmunk is quite a solitary creature. Oh, there's that word solitary again. What do you remember about the word solitary? We talked about that last week. I have never known more than one to occupy the same den. That is a context clue for the word solitary. Apparently, no two can agree to live together. What a clean, pert, dapper, nervous little fellow he is. There's some good description of the chipmunk. How fast his heart beats as he stands up on the wall by the roadside. With his hands spread out upon his breast, he regards you intently. A movement of your arm, and he will dart into the wall with a saucy chipper sound. It has the effect, ooh, I like this. It has the effect of slamming the door behind him. Okay, we're going to stop there, friends. When we come together in class today, we're going to talk about what we just read this morning together. You are going to summarize page 12 through 15 on your own, and we're going to read that poem, Wait, and then we'll read on again tomorrow. See you in just a little bit.